I have a fair bit of experience with various forms of DMT, crystalline, Jim Jam, spice, changa, and in this case, a vape pen cartridge loaded with an extract. My friend noted that he thought it was likely made with Acacia confusa root bark and propylene glycol. The experience in the past has led me to believe, in comparison to the different forms I had tried, that the pen contains not only NN-DMT, but a small amount of NMT and other trace alkaloids found in Mimosa hostilis root bark and Acacia confusa root bark. In other words, I'm confident that it isn't made with crystalline DMT. It is a very nice sunny day around 11 a.m. My window is wide open and there's a cool breeze flowing through the room. I didn't plan to trip this day, but I was momentarily inspired, which in the past had led to very challenging experiences. Before dosing, I practiced some mindful breathing. I paced a little around the room. I let my cat out of the room to make sure he didn't trip with me, and he seemed to know exactly why, never scratching at the door for the duration of this trip. I tidied a few things, moved my bong into place so that I could easily smoke some cannabis whenever I might want, and sat down. I grabbed my aquamarine crystals and put on a few necklaces and bracelets that I had been given by people I cared about over the years. I relaxed back into the soft chair and asked the DMT for guidance. I held the DMT-loaded vaporizer cartridge to my face and with closed eyes tried deeply to prepare for the experience and to breathe, still asking the DMT to guide me towards meaning in my life and in my surroundings. I have been stressed, feeling like quitting my job, and self-isolating. First dosing. I take the first long draw with straightened posture and closed eyes, holding in a deep lungful. I exhale and immediately bring the pen back to my mouth and begin inhaling again. After another long draw, this time beginning to see a flashing in the upper periphery of my closed eyes and feeling my body begin to vibrate, I smiled wide and placed the pen between my legs, then exhaled as I relaxed back into the chair, feeling my lips and eyelids quiver rapidly. This exhalation was divine. It felt as though it was perfectly timed and almost guided, as if by the DMT spirit or whatever you might call it. The body vibration effect was strong, in harmony with the deep hum and liquid-like, sharp and electrical auditory hallucinations I was experiencing. As this quickly intensifies, I begin to feel physically as though I am being held in place, almost strapped in. I sort of wince with uncertainty, feeling suddenly held down, almost like rape. But I remembered that I essentially signed a waiver for this when I took the hit, so I settled into it and stayed calm. I am having my brain rinsed. It feels as though there is a light or magnetism-related being, possibly a part of my brain that doesn't usually communicate with muscles and orifices, instructing, almost forcing me to open my jaw, move it to the left, and tilt my head in such a way that I found new muscles being stretched. It did this with auditory and closed-eye hallucinations that my brain seemed to interpret as direct muscular instructions. Having almost no choice, I was pushed into contortions of my facial muscles. It sort of felt like being manhandled by an aggressive dentist. Though I could feel that my muscles were doing it all, I was not being handled by a ghost. I tilted my head to one side, lowering the opposite shoulder as closed-eye visuals guided me to stick my tongue out in a certain way, twisting and stretching my neck, jaw, and face in what felt like an alien-induced chiropractic energy healing session. I laughed to myself as I allowed this alien chiropractor to do its thing, sort of making the kind of faces I would imagine someone would make while being aggressively contorted by a doctor. This continued for a little while longer, becoming less intense as I come down from the first dose. I was smiling, feeling euphoric, though still confused as I had just been given forced therapy by an interdimensional. I felt the sort of nasal drip I have experienced with DMT and changa in the past. I opened my eyes and relaxed as I looked around the room and asked myself, what the fuck just happened? The room was bright, breathing like mushroom visuals, and the leaves of my begonia plant looked lively and conscious. It felt as though I just underwent interdimensional head surgery. I then decided that a redose was a good idea. But this time I would do it on the floor naked. Directly in sunlight, I feel that when naked, DMT is more intense, or at least a little different. Air on the body feels more natural than clothes, skin sensations are amplified and very strange, and the experience has a more primal or ancient tone to it. I pushed aside some things, making sure that I had room to lay and spread my limbs out in all directions with some small limitation, and got out a soft blanket. I took off all my clothes and lay on top of the blanket, head towards the window, my aquamarine crystals on my pelvis, my belly button, and an optical calcite at my chest. I should note I have no history of this kind of practice, nor do I believe in the metaphysical properties of crystals. I do, however, have a large collection of various cool minerals and stones. I have an intuition that there is something to the idea, so I lean into the esoteric ways from time to time. I had sunlight over my face. It felt great and liberating, as if I were in a field outside, wind passing over me. I was still in a somewhat whimsical state of mind. Second dosing. I lifted my back to a straight-legged seated position, taking some deep, mindful breaths, and took a long, deep inhale from the pen. I held it for approximately 10 seconds and exhaled, following it with another hit, this time smaller. Laying back slowly, as if doing yoga, I exhaled and stretched my arms downward, tilting my head back towards the sun. In my closed eyes, I saw rapidly strobing streaks angled down into my visual space from above, likely sunlight from the window behind me. I was again guided into contortions, stretching my jaw, sticking out my tongue. This time it felt necessary to vocalize and breathe with a hum in order to cope with this surgery session. I felt all of the orifices and tubes in my head do a sort of choreographed wave or smile along with my lungs, all still rapidly vibrating. It felt as though a shaman was doing the weird shh sounds and slapping me with leaves or whatever, sucking the negative energies out of me. I started to move my legs up into the air and spread them out, doing a sort of Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga, still keeping the crystals balanced and centered, again undergoing interdimensional head surgery. I was surprised as I momentarily gained strength and control over muscles in my back and legs in ways I have never felt. As I breathed heavily and moved my legs into a sort of butterfly position, I arched my back again, sort of balancing on my head in order to have sunlight bathe my closed eyes. I was seeing a rapidly strobing series of streaks and dots, possibly pineal gland optics, eyelid refraction, and they didn't have any sort of symmetry or notable complexity to them, but they were, however, strikingly beautiful and colorful. They would brighten and turn from red overtoned rainbows to a bright white, the more I faced towards the sun, and the flashing rhythmically matched the vibrations or quivering my whole body seemed to be doing. As this went on, I would have my sinuses and esophagus oscillate or contort in a sort of cleansing wave, seemingly in order to move fluids. I would swallow, gurgle, let out vocal yips and hums. I would hold my breath either with full or empty lungs and build pressure in various areas like my cheeks, chest, and throat, then release. It was an intense breathing exercise. Deep breaths, holding, pulsed exhales, all while contorting my esophagus and sinuses in order to restrict flow with some sort of healing or clinical intention. This entire experience was comprised of what felt like strictly clinical hallucinations, and me doing wacky yoga, making wacky sounds, looking as though I am possessed. I sat up, took off the bracelets and necklaces, put down the crystals and laid back down. I started some more normal yoga flow, stretching my legs up into the air, rolling, bending. This felt euphoric. I struck a few yoga poses, turned myself over into child's pose, then did a sort of sun salutation, then stood myself back up. I stretched my arms up and smiled with my last trippy breath. I had rapidly come down as I returned to the chair. I then loaded myself a small bowl of weed and ripped it in one big hit. It felt like déjà vu when I took the hit of cannabis, like I was exactly where I had been before. I had returned to my day. I then put my clothes back on. What a wild ride and a much-needed therapy session.